I think that is the beauty of all the unorganized sector, especially in India, that we have. That is everywhere. Like customers who are staying in a particular tier two, tier three cities or villages, the shop owner there exactly knows who the customer or
Right.
what their wants and needs are, and able to do that. And I think that would be kind of the nirvana state of any retailer to
Get
get
to.
to.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of CX with Chopra, where we talk about everything customer experience, build different perspectives around customer experience. Because it's very interesting because how we have seen the whole evolution of, how initially I think businesses and brands were product focused, where they used to focus on how they can enhance, build the product. I mean, if you give you an example of, let's say, Sony Walkman, the idea was you build a great product. If it has all the features, people will start using it, consumer will start adopting it, buying it, using it. Then the whole shift started moving towards being consumer focused, which I think Amazon probably aced it, where the focus shifted from product features more towards customer satisfaction. Are customers getting the value out of it or not? And from there, I think now we are in an era where we are talking about that it has evolved to customer experience, where it's not just about product or consumer, but the whole ambience of all the touch points that a consumer has. What I think, what uh, all the touch points that a consumer would have about the brand, what the consumer is reading, consuming about the brand or the product, how does the consumer feel about the product? So all these things, the cumulative effect of all this, all the touch points brings or creates that customer experience. And interestingly now, there are new dimensions to it as well. Now a feeling or emotion is also an aspect of customer experience, that how is person feeling while buying a product, while consuming a product. If it's post consumption, it's a service, how a person going through that experience, be it going to a restaurant, being using a product or using an ipad, how's that experience? So now the focus has shifted, and now it is one of the most important things, because with just one bad experience, poor experience, it's very easy for customers. Now if we talk about the context of retail, it's very easy for customers to switch, because this landscape has become so much competitive. There's so many brands out there, so many options out there for customers. So with just one bad experience, the consumer or the user can quickly shift. So it's very important for brands to focus on consumer experience, and we're going to talk about that. And today's guest, we have Vasanth. Thank you for joining. I'll quickly introduce yourself. I think in the last 2 decades we have seen digital business transformation, and now we're traversing towards CX evolution. And Vasanth, I think, has been at the forefront of digital business transformation, driving so many, I would say, tech innovations, to working with big brands and making sure that the tech which is being implemented is also relevant to the consumer, relevant to the context, I think relevant to the environment. And having said that, I've personally worked with you, seen you, so I know you are very passionate about creating value. You're obsessed about being customer focused while we're building any product, creating any new experience, and you're driven by outcomes, and which is very inspiring for me. And it'll be great to have discussions about CX with you, because you've had the experience of working with traditional retailers as well, to working, how they have on some of the e-commerce players. You worked across the value stream of retail, if I would say, right from merchandising to supply chain to marketing to e-commerce to customer service, pretty much everything. So thanks for joining and welcome to CX with Chopra. So I want to start with asking you, how do you define CX?
First of all, thanks for having me, Arjun, and really excited to be part of this conversation, which is very, very close to my heart. But first of all, great to catch up with you after so many
So
years.
many
So
years. Likewise,
great,
yeah.
great to be here, and super excited to talk about it. Right. So, having said that, of course, this is something, as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the some topic which is very close to my heart. If you ask me about customer experience, you touched upon it earlier. I would like to share my perspective through the usual suspect, which is four W's,
Hmm.
which is the why, the what, and who and where. Okay.
Hmm.
So let's talk about the why first, which is the why customer experience. It's not about, when you talk about, again, retail or any industry for that matter, the why for a customer is always about a mission. It's not about shopping or making a
Hmm.
purchase or whatever. It's about a mission that they are looking to accomplish. That mission could be, in the context of retail, could be renovating their kitchen, or just buying their weekly grocery, or celebrating their kids' birthday.
Hmm.
Like that's the mission anybody has, right? And from that perspective, now what is customer experience from that perspective? To me, the customer experience is creating a tangible and or a perceptible value towards that, achieving that goal, basically, right?
Hmm.
And you touched upon the emotional element as well. Which is what is a
Yeah.
perceptible value, whereas the tangible value is the actual mission of, like, buying something, or like getting the value in terms of, like, the cost or reduced price and so on and so forth, right? That is your what. Now the third is around who.
Hmm.
And who is not about the brand's existing customers, but also their prospective customers, right? And finally, where. Again, a very, very critical element, and this is something that has evolved over the, like, decades. The where of customer experience is every touch point between a brand and the customer, whether it is direct touch point or an indirect touch point, right? So net net, what we are looking at is primarily the combination of these four. That's how I look at it, in terms of creating this tangible or perceptible value to meet a goal for a particular customer in their journey.
Hmm.
And at every touch point, whether it is like a direct touch point or an indirect touch point, and more importantly, for not just for a existing customer but also for prospective customers. So that's how I kind
Hmm.
of look at customer experience.
Because very interesting because to talk about tangible and perceptive, right? And which also then leads to that, do we use that as a lens to define the value or measure CX? Or they're
Abs-
two different things?
no, absolutely right. So this
Well,
can.
value and measurability probably would be two different things.
No, the measurability is about, like, looking at how exactly you can, like, define your even the objectives, as well as, like, measure in terms of the whatever value that we are talking about, right? So I
Hmm.
just spoke about the tangible value and a perceptible value. To me, that is nothing but a quantitative way of, like, measuring something,
Right.
as well as, like, how you look at the qualitative value as well, right?
Hmm.
And that both are important, because when you talk about, like, a value, it could be both quantitative as well as qualitative.
Interesting because I also read somewhere that customer experience is nothing but an art of perception.
Absolutely,
Right.
right?
That through the all the touch points, all the messaging that you give, that experience that you create, and that creates that perception, and that perception would probably translate into brand trust, into brand reputation, and eventually propel sales for sure.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, it is the, like, the hard numbers,
Hmm.
but it's not just about hard numbers, but also the emotional element behind it, the satisfaction behind it, the dopamine behind it, essentially.
But coming back to the value part, because often we talk about the value that the customer brings to the organization,
Hmm.
right? It could be CSAT, it could be customer lifetime value that we look at. But initially, like you mentioned, it's the customer is on a mission. There's a purpose, or there's something that the customer is trying to achieve. It could be, going to take out money from the bank. It could be, let's say, to have a meal. It could be to celebrate kid's birthday. So it's very interesting that how do we then define the value that the brand would bring to the customer in
So,
this whole mission or journey?
no, no, absolutely right. As you rightly mentioned, value at the end of the day in the whole, like in the business context, can be threefold. One is the value to the customers, which is the whole context behind when I explain about customer experience. Because at the end of the day, what is the value customer gets out of a brand?
Hmm.
The second is the value which the business is getting out of the customer.
Hmm.
And third, there is also this mutual value, which could be a potential force multiplier between the customer and the business, so that it's like a symbiotic relationship there,
Hmm.
right? So since you asked about the customer value, and which is the crux of, like customer experience, right? First of all, the way I would look at it is in look at from three different lenses. One is in terms of effectiveness, second is efficiency, and third is satisfaction, right? So when we talk about effectiveness, it's about like how well I am meeting my mission. For example, if I'm able to, if I want to renovate my kitchen, how exactly I can procure or choose the right products for doing this. Similarly, what is the right, who is the right installer I can bring in to do that installation for them, right? So that is kind of your effectiveness, and more importantly, I'm not just completing my mission, but also completing it like accurately. Right? That's about effectiveness. Then comes the efficiency part of it, which is in terms of like what are the key benefit and efficient benefits I'm getting in terms of whether it's being cost or whether I'm getting with the much what do you say, better promotion, I'm able to have the right ability to return, so on and so forth, right? And third is the satisfaction, which is the, again, going back to that emotional element there. So what I need to have a sense of accomplishment. How is that brand able to offer me that sense of accomplishment and satisfaction? So all these three things is like the way to probably look at how a value can be generated for a customer, like primarily how quickly I can, like for let's take a simple customer journey as an in a retail context. First one, how quickly or easily I can make my purchase, basically my purchase convenience. And even before that, how quickly I can even find products.
Find products.
How, like even taking a friend like one step earlier, how easily I can even think of my brand and relate to it. It's basically what is the mind share there,
Mind share.
right? And then coming back, okay, I made the purchase, how easily I can get my service done. So what is the service convenience? So, and while I do all these things, okay, there is also this element of efficiency. Okay, I have a better price, like a quicker lead time. I can get my grocery in like half an hour's time.
Correct.
So those are some of the efficiency element. And while doing so, like offer that great sense of accomplishment and great sense of care or empathy that the brand can create to the customer. So that's kind of how I would look at like a brand offer value to end customers.
Interesting point here is that what I observed is it also a lot depends on what are the brand values. For example, what does that brand stand for? What are their values and how do they empower, let's say, uh, the employee or who's interacting with the customers to take decisions at runtime? Because especially in case of customer experience, you only have a small window to fix things, right? And I mean, I was reading through interesting examples like Traders Joe. Now, as per their policy, the staff can help the customers probably spend 15-20 minutes looking for a particular product or giving you information, even if that product is just $5, but they'll go ahead and do that. If the staff feels that the customer is having a bad day, that staff is enabled to gift a bouquet of flowers to the customers to make sure that they're having a nice experience. And likewise, Ritz Carlton, I was reading that every employee uh, is empowered to spend up to $2,000 on a customer if they feel they've had a bad experience to recover from that bad experience. I mean, these are some of the great examples where, and even Taj for that matter. I've been a great brand ambassador for Taj hotels. I mean, I think post pandemic we've been to pretty much, I mean, about 8 to 10 Taj properties. And I was talking to one of the restaurant managers, and while I was talking, it was an interesting perspective he gave because I personally feel that their experience is great. I've had and how they deliver it, and how I feel when I'm in a Taj property. And he said, we are told that when you are talking to the customer, and let's say you've taken a request and come back, you are representing the customer. You're not representing the brand. When you come back to the kitchen, you are representative of the customer, and you'll try to find out if that whatever the customer is asking for, if that's possible or not, what can be done. Then go back and give those answers or give that service or product. And that was a great perspective. I mean, because you talked about effectiveness, efficiency. So I think that has to go a lot with brand values as well.
No, absolutely right,
Huh,
and it's interesting that you talk about Taj. Let
huh,
me take that as an example, as like for just for myself,
huh.
in terms of the third element on satisfaction,
Right.
or what I would call it emotional benefit that Taj as a brand has offered me. The greatest example for that is Taj is probably one of the few hotels which allow pets. And I am a dog lover, and I do have a 2.5-year-old golden retriever, and I would like to take him to any place I
Of
go on
course.
vacation with. So, like similar to yourself, like I'm also a great ambassador of
Uh,
Taj, just for the reason that they allow my pet to be part of like along with me during my vacation. So that is like it's nothing to do with the great rooms or the great property location that they offer,
right.
or the great price that they offer, but it is the emotional benefit that they offer me as a customer. So like that's a great example which
And
I
that
can think
clearly
of.
translates to brand loyalty. I
Exactly.
mean, now that we are talking about it as well, that we've become brand ambassadors for that.
Exactly. Like, of course, we moved from the retail to the
Right.
different industry there, but
But
great
even
example.
let's talk about Traders Joe for that
Yeah.
matter. I want to also talk about, or let's take an example of Costco. Now, Costco in US is known for its policy that you can return any product after any number of days or weeks or months with no questions asked return policy, which is great customer experience. Probably they have figured out a way of how to get the ROI of all this, but and they've also disrupted the industry, I feel, for others as well, that now everybody is expecting that. But having said that, I mean, there's a cost attached to good CX. When we talk about good CX, talk about satisfaction, effectiveness, I mean, all those things, but then there's a cost attached to it.
Hmm.
So how do brands focus on that? Because I think it's not a question of giving a good experience or not. It's more about, yes, execution for sure, but also the math behind it.
No, no, absolutely right. It's a very important part in terms of when you ask about like the cost. I may have a very like what do you say the opinion which I don't know how many will agree here, right? The point of view which I have around the cost is like, see, at the end of the day we are talking about customer experience. Customer experience is at the heart of like any business, because
Hmm.
customer is at the heart of any business, right?
Hmm.
So customer experience is the ligament which connects a brand to a customer, right?
But is that a
So
fair assumption to make, or that's
that
it's
that it is right, because at the end of the day, yes, there is a cost involved in it, right?
hmm.
But the lens I would look at it is not just cost. The lens I would look at it is like the ROI arrived at the cost that is being incurred, right? So yes, for getting something such an important element like a customer experience, there has to be an investment. There is like no pain, no gain, right?
Hmm.
There has to be investment to gain some value out of it. But having said that, what is important as a practitioner or a strategist to look at is, hey, I am spending this much.
Hmm.
How well I am actually delivering it, right? And more importantly, like how like often I'm checking and measuring them, so
Hmm.
that there is always a like positive ROI around it. So it's not about the I, but also an ROI that is like also an important play in my view.
But brands need to have that long-term view then.
Absolutely.
Not look at short-term like order conversion or some of the other
No, it
metrics.
not at all. Not at all,
Probably look
right?
at customer lifetime value over years.
Exactly. And exactly because customer life, like you come to that actual measurement point, right? Because
Hmm.
to my point earlier, when you talk about like a cost, always pair it up with the ROI. And how do I go about doing that? I need to have a solid measures or OKRs to guide me get there. And
Hmm.
and you rightly mentioned customer lifetime value is one of the key quantitative metric
Hmm.
that needs to be looked at.
Hmm.
And you are bang on in terms of it is not a tactical metric,
It's not
and,
right.
and it's not an easy metric to calculate either, right?
Hmm.
It is a long-term metric that needs to be had. But at the same time, that is one of the key drivers for us to keep looking at how can I continue to keep improving it. And it's okay, I invest as long as I'm able to like improve my metrics. And again, going back to some of the things that we spoke about, it's not about the quantitative metrics like the customer lifetime value or customer churn or like customer retention and so on and so forth, but also the qualitative like nature of some of the metrics like the CSATs and NPSs, right? So both these things should go hand in
Hand in hand.
hand, and like we need to look at it holistically and see whether am I doing the right investment, and then like take that call. But to your point, yes, that can be like a fact that okay, as an organization, let's say, right, I am not still mature to even have a good view of customer data. But let me go and do some personalization. You are not going to get the right return out of it, because not just because everybody thinks, hey, I'm personalization is great, but if you don't have the right ecosystem in place and start like spending or investing in doing things, but that's not going to yield the right value. So definitely you need to look at it holistically.
And it's very interesting now because, like I talk about Costco, interesting example. I mean, the reason I mentioned because I just read today morning in the news that there's a big queue of people who are returning the Christmas tree back to Costco, and the headline was that is Costco a rental into renting service or or actually retail or CPG store. But having said that, I'm like the point I'm trying to conclude is that they have figured it out. I'm sure they have figured it out over long term that what's the customer lifetime value. They know. It's not like they don't know people are not going to come back and return the Christmas tree. Probably they know, and they still don't ask any questions, and they take back because they know that the customer is a loyal. I mean, having a Costco membership, they know they have done all that math, and we'll touch upon those things. I think what role probably tech would play in that. But having said that, I think for any retailer or any even brick and mortar store, it's very important for them that you may feel that giving a great customer experience could be point of parity or where you have to do it, but it's also important for you to understand that how are you going to translate that into ROI. Do that calculation first, do that math first in terms of how it's going to, and then be patient enough. If you know you need to have that 1 year 2 year window to build that brand advocacy, bring that brand loyalty, which will eventually reap benefits. That benefits could come from other ways as well. I don't know what percentage share of, in case of IKEA for that matter, people go there and there's an IKEA restaurant as well. People, I think I'm forgetting the number, they spend substantial amount eating at IKEA as well at the restaurant. So their whole creating their experiences, they know that something that they're giving away for customer experience to help that customer would eventually come back as well. So it's important, I'm just saying important for them to define it properly as well.
Totally agree with you.
And now coming to next point, which is also very relevant, is we look at, especially in case of retail, before pandemic, during pandemic, and hopefully now we can say post pandemic, hopefully, uh, there's a shift in the touch points that users used to have, right? Before pandemic in retail, probably digital as a channel would be 5 to 10%. In most of the organizations, there would be a certain segment of users, if I say, an adoption life cycle, who would adopt to the whole digital journeys, e-commerce, but there will be a certain segment who would still go to the store and buy even for groceries and everything. During pandemic, I mean, there was a big shift. It was a hard shift, I would say, rather, where everybody had to go digital. Had to go digital. I mean, from a user perspective, even if I look at my parents now, they book an app on Uber, they travel in that, they order groceries online, they pretty much do everything online. And for me to see only in a span of 2 3 years is great. I mean, it's a reflection of how industry or consumer behavior has changed. So coming to that, how do you think that the whole CX has evolved pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and probably now post-pandemic?
No, actually, that's a very like interesting view to look at, right? Because in my view, like it was a very important litmus test for many retailers across the globe in terms of how well they were prepared to actually touch customers through their brand in a completely virtual world without a physical contact. And couple of things in terms of like what exactly happened there, and we all know,
Hmm.
right? 2020 had the maximum number of retailers who went bankrupt
Hmm.
in
Yep.
US, right, in the last 15 years, especially post the 2008 financial fallout, right? So clearly it showed like how much retailers were like ready to get to the customers in a
Right.
very different paradigm
Hmm.
when there was no physical touch involved. Having said that, on the contrary, this also helped humongously in terms of acceleration of the digital transformation of various retailers
Right.
in terms of how exactly they were able to offer the right value on the digital touch points, right? And especially like many retailers who are actually doing good on that element, they got significantly benefited while doing that, right? But if you look at it, again, we talked about the pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, so that's one of the key shift.
Hmm.
And not just that, one of the other learning, in my view, what retailers took away is also like empathizing better with the
Hmm.
customer in such a situation, because
Hmm.
it's not about just like in terms of customers not being like physically present, but there were a lot of things happening around the whole situation in the whole 1.5 years across the globe.
Right.
How do they empathize with them? What are the right value that they could offer? Every businesses were trying. There are so many
Correct.
examples, right from some of the luxury brands offering a live streaming
Hmm.
of doing things, as well as like how can you do a what do you say, even the home retail world where I'm coming from, doing a virtual
Tour.
like a kind of a support in doing a job of an installation or
Right.
even a plumbing work. So there were like it opened up much more like
Avenues.
opportunities in terms of how you can create value for customers, right? But the interesting thing is, we are now okay 2 years or three,
Hmm.
post that pandemic. The relevance of the physical in-store experience has not gone away. As a
Hmm.
matter of fact,
Hmm.
that is still pretty much like I was reading a recent report earlier. I believe there's still like almost 66% of customers who start their shopping journey in store,
Start in store.
start in store, right?
Hmm.
And it's also interesting to know the notion of okay, rather the involvement of the store channel is not the same across different retail categories, right?
Hmm.
So for example, like a category like a home improvement where I come from, or a grocery, the store's relevance is like still huge. It
Still
plays a
huge.
very very vital part, especially where like in the case of again home retail. If you have to talk about it, it's a very interesting category where there is a very diverse set of product assortment where you need the product know-how to make a right purchase. Where you need to talk to a store associate, take their help to make a purchase, and probably take a look and feel, see my what paint color or the
Right.
lumber I need to look out for. So there is a
Hold the
lot
vegetable
of
probably before
exactly,
buying, right? Or the fruit.
exactly. At the same time, there are like categories like technology products,
Hmm.
which like the digital channel definitely takes a higher precedence in terms of engagement, right? But
Right.
having said that, like definitely we have evolved into a situation where what we call it digital, right? Like
Hmm.
no customer is having a sticky point to one channel, but everybody cuts across in their mission across multiple channels, whether it is web, mobile, app,
Correct.
like your offline store, offline advertisements, online advertisements, like TVs, like everything.
Everything.
See, everything kind of influence, and that's where like it's also an important element when you talk about CX. We cannot go without talking about omni-channel experience.
Right.
So because that we are at a juncture in our broader industry wherein like customer is agnostic of which channel that a brand is engaging with them. They expect that consistency. So that's
Seamless
when
behavior. Right.
absolutely, and
Hmm.
that's why when we talk about like the earlier definition of where, that where is kind of everywhere essentially. Like the customer experience that exact experience, exact what do you say, information, or like a product or service across the board.
Hmm. Interesting. And now, in that context, also want to ask that what role does tech play in this now? Because there've been a lot of organizations which were not digital native, which
Yep.
probably we'll also talk about that later. And then suddenly there's this tech disruption also,
Yep.
where everybody has to get onto that bandwagon because all the customers are there,
Yep.
right? Especially during pandemic or those 2-3 years, they had to catch on to that. And now the expectation is that we want seamless experience. We want brands to, like you mentioned, give us personalized experiences, to understand, acknowledge what my needs are, to remember what I did in the past, and give me something which is contextual. They should know. Probably it's my wife's birthday and I need flowers. So instead of me looking for, they should be the one reminding me. I think Fords and Petals and all these brands do that. So what role does tech play in today's world then?
So technology is probably the key enabler or accelerator in actually getting the right experience in this kind of a context, right? Especially, I would look at, when we talk about technology, probably I'll break it down into two parts, right? One is just data, like, which is in terms of like, okay, what kind of data I'm able to create as well as I'm able to leverage for driving the right experience. Second is actually the technology with which I'm able to offer that right experience, whether it be effectiveness or efficiency or satisfaction, right? So there are two elements to it. Now let's talk about like the first part, which is like the data, right? One of the, again, like the paradigm shift, at least I am seeing or have seen across like multiple retailers, is that with the, whether it be COVID or even probably before that, especially when you talk about digital transformation, we cannot like not talk about like like the data transformation as well,
Right.
right? Because they go hand in hand,
Right.
because data is going to be again at the center of any business strategy, right? The way how you are going to enable your to talk to your like customers. For that, you got to really understand who your customers are, how they are behaving with you.
Right.
Based on that, you actually like figure out what solutions that I need to like
Offer them.
go for. And that is where your second part of the other technology comes, whether it's experiential commerce or you want to like give an app or whatever solution that you're going to give. That's again, technology makes it much more easier to reach the customer in whatever that they are looking to do.
Then in that space, how do we go about acing the whole personalization game from a tech data standpoint? Because one interesting example, so one of my friend, so they have a family business of footwear in Delhi, and they've been running it successfully for probably 5 decades. One interesting thing I observed was that my friend's father, he sits at the shop. He's been sitting there for last, God knows, 30-40 years. He knows each and every customer.
Absolutely.
I was just there at their store for half an hour, 1 hour, and I observed he spoke to all the customers, at least the customers which have been coming. Probably they have a very high brand loyalty and high return rate as well. And he knew everybody. People knew him. They knew he knew what to give them, what their preferences are, and what they don't like. And before they even could say something, he would go, tell the boy that show them this kind of sandals or this kind of shoes. And likewise, another example could be, I keep going to a particular restaurant again and again, and you start to, the staff knows you. They know what you'll order. They'll probably ask you, would you again like to go for this? Now, with this whole shift more towards digital, I think one blessing is that people have shifted onto digital so that more traces, more data points to collect about the user under consent. But and now it's very, I think it's make or break if they don't use that data and create that personalized experience, which has been working so well for last so many decades. So how do we go about that whole personalization game?
No, that's what, like, so you brought in a very like a very pertinent point here, right? About the so-called hyper personalization,
Right.
like in terms of how a kirana store can do it. I think that is the beauty of all the unorganized sector, especially in India, that we have. That is everywhere. Like the customers who are staying in a particular tier 2, tier 3 cities or villages, the shop owner there exactly knows who the customer or what
Right.
their wants and needs are, and able to do that. And I think that would be kind of the nirvana state of any retailer to
Get to.
get to, right? But you are absolutely right. We have a great tool for us to get towards that, and that
Okay.
is data, right? And with the, of course, with the COVID that you spoke about, as well as with the acceleration of digital transformation that we are seeing, definitely there is a huge trace of data coming
Hmm.
into play. And moreover, we are at the sweet spot of what do you say, the processing power, which
Hmm.
has like a multiple exponentially has improved.
Right.
Cost of storage has significantly
Gone
decreased,
down.
and even the data. I think by 2025, I believe we are going to have roughly like 180 zettabytes, and a zettabyte has 21 zeros, if I'm right,
Right.
right? And not just that, 90% of that data like were created in the last 2 years,
Right.
and it is going to keep increasing. And now, and the kind of sources that is going to be proliferated in
Right.
creating that data is going to be increasing with so many IoTs and coming in and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
So that is the huge blessing that we have got, right?
Right.
And how do I do that?
Hmm.
And you touched upon a very important point when you explained that situation. How the shop owner, kirana store,
Right.
are able to do it? Because simple thing, they knew their customer,
Right.
right? So how can we get there? Only way for us to know is as long as we are able to capture the customer data in a completely like a 360-degree view.
Hmm.
In other words, as a business organization, it is imperative for us to create a digital twin of every customer. And when I say digital twin, whether we talk about the self-declared data in terms of, okay, hey, my name and address and so on and so forth, or some of the inferred information through
Hmm.
my transactional behavior, my browse behavior, my in-store behavior, my marketing behavior across both the regular owned channels versus paid channels,
Hmm.
or for that matter, post purchase, how I interact with my customer service or
Hmm.
a lead, sales lead, right? So it's extremely important to get that holistic view of the customer, and there lies the success of any organization which is really looking to make a difference in terms of customer experience,
Hmm.
because the crux of that is to have that right understanding of the customer, or in other words, a single view of that customer as a digital twin, so that you could leverage that information to create that right experience. And you talk
Right.
about personalization, we all know the definition of it: getting the right product or service at the right time,
To the
at
right
the right
user.
moment, right?
Right.
That, and you can achieve it, and that's your like typical integral limit tending to like infinity, right? We have to get there. All the stars needs to be aligned, and as an organization to be even getting towards it, one of the first imperative is to have a solid customer data platform that can enable them to get there.
Because I was coming to that. So how do we go about creating that digital twin?
So, like couple of things, right? Some of the untypical organizations that you can look at it. Some of the key challenges that you have is in terms of, first of all, the customer data in
Hmm.
itself is going to be like could be siloed, right?
Correct.
Number two, in terms of the quality of data that we capture,
Right.
right? And third, in terms of like when I'm going to have it, even though I have like my like your like good quality data, or I'm able to bring them together, I may not even have the right customer definition in terms of what I'm looking at.
Hmm.
To address that, typically, like at least what I've seen in the past, is to look at, first of all, try to get, especially with data privacy is a playing a key element, and it's a growing area there. It's important to get like the self declared information by the customer
Right.
as much as possible, and especially, and that's again a force multiplier. The more trust a customer has with the brand,
Right.
more information they are going to share with us.
Right.
But for them to gain their trust, they need to get more value out of the brand as well. So it is the like I was mentioning earlier about the mutual value. This is a one classic example of
Correct.
mutual value that could be offered between like a brand and a customer. Now, with that being said, that is probably the first thing. The more we know about the customer by themselves, nothing better than that. Second thing is also about like some of the information that we could gather out of some of the like a third party sites like your CompuServe, or there are so many other like partners whom you can get the data from, especially on the socio-demographic information, right?
Hmm.
The third is about the various behavioral elements, right?
Correct.
That behavioral elements, as I was mentioning earlier, could be transactions, whether on my digital channel or on my like a social channel or in my store, right? How am I able to like kind of connect them, right? As well as in terms of like in some of the other behaviors like my browse behavior or a marketing behavior, right?
Hmm.
One of the important elements in here is about customer identification,
Hmm.
right? Because as we all know, like except for certain segments in retail like the grocery or for that matter Costco
Yeah.
likes of it, who have a subscription or a membership kind of a value that could be added, majority of the customers who interact with the brand will be anonymous. So it is
Right.
important not just about customer to be identified when they interact with the brand,
Hmm.
but also once they interact it, be able to connect that information and create that single view of that customer, so that you are able to get a holistic view of customer, and that is an extremely critical element
Right.
in getting that insights.
And this customer data platform would help integrate data from all these different channels into one platform and build that one view of the customer.
Absolutely. So that is going to be your like the goal in terms of, especially when larger enterprise, it's extremely important every member or every division of your organization
Hmm.
across the value chain, whether it is merchandising team
Right.
or the supply chain team or the marketing team or your sales channel or your customer service, everybody look at the customer in the same way, right? In
Hmm.
your earlier example of a kirana store, it is that one superman like who is so adept in his business or her
Correct.
business. They exactly know about the customers because
Right.
they're experienced with them for such a long time. But in an enterprise there are so many players involved, so it is an imperative for everybody to look at the same customer with the same lens. But more importantly, everybody has a rich information in their touch point. How
Right.
can you all bring them together and help the other part of the value chain to gain insights out of that?
Because one interesting notion was that CDPs used to typically sit with the CMO, because it was seen in the last few years as something which will help for marketing, generating awareness, driving awareness, reaching out to people, more about the customers. But now, like you're saying, the once we have a 360-degree view of the customer, the use cases would pan out across the value chain.
No, absolutely right. Because in my view, like creating a digital twin is a strategic asset,
Right.
right? Which is going to help across the value chain within a retail ecosystem, right? Of course, there when you're looking at building a platform, something like this, you
Hmm.
got to have a sponsor, and
Right.
whoever can yield the first benefit or the maximum benefit will be your primary sponsor, and
Correct.
that goes without saying. But at the same time, it is a strategic asset that could create value across enterprise and for a long time. And probably that is one of the key enabler for the metric that we spoke about earlier, which is about customer lifetime value.
All right.
So it is, if I'm wanting to look at, hey, how well my customer experience is doing, like I need to know how I am improving my customer lifetime value. For figuring that out, I need
Hmm.
to first of all collect that metric in
Right.
a like a unified manner, in a like what do you say, with better quality.
Hmm.
For that, of course, I need to collect the information and have that right
Correct.
platform. So it goes the whole cycle. But the
Hmm.
good thing is, with more digitization of organizations, whether
Hmm.
it's native digital native organizations or like the typical traditional organizations, we are at the era of everybody accelerating their
Right.
digitization with like digital at the center of their strategy, data as like center of their strategy, it is definitely going to help organizations understand customers better.
Right. And I think I can probably relate this point to initial discussion around what's the cost of good CX. Because now, let's say with a big bazaar, if they know a lot of their details about their customer, their patterns, and with a digital twin, they can replicate the experience. Let's say what it used to be when let's say I would go to the same grocery store. The person knows me here. If I go open the app knows me what I want. It's probably end of the month I need to reorder certain groceries. They know everything. Probably now they can create that experience at scale,
Yes.
and that's how you can derive the value or ROI of your CX initiatives. I mean,
No, no, absolutely right. And again, going back to your earlier example of your like a kirana store in Delhi, right? So that is your nirvana state of creating that one-to-one
right,
personalization, like your hyper
relationship.
personalization. But and this is where it's extremely important. There's a key watch out here when we embark in this journey of personalization. One of the things which I did mention earlier is about the right quality of data, because without the right quality of data, you cannot even think of doing any personalization.
Right,
So that's where the customer data platform or something of that sorts is going to be a key
right.
enabler there. But having said that, even when we have a digital twin created, we also need to factor in when you talk about a business, customers are not homogeneous, right? Definitely, and the same customer can have multiple missions when they interact with the brand.
Right.
So it is extremely important to understand in terms of like what part of stage the customer is in their journey in accomplishing their mission, and also what kind of segment they are part of, right? Like that is the logical starting point to first of all start segmenting your broad brush
Right.
of customers into like specific macro segments or micro segments, and the ultimate goal is towards one-on-one personalization essentially.
Right.
So I think that's also one of the key like watch outs, because you cannot go and say, hey, you know what, this is my customer, let me go and like create an experience for them. No, the customers are never going to be homogeneous.
Correct.
Like we got to be absolutely having a view of what journey that they are on and what segment that they belong to, so that the customer experience needs to be custom for that customer in their journey.
Yes, interesting, because again, tying back to the whole cost of good CX, because coming to that now, let's say once somebody has a CDP in place, they have customer 360 view. Now it's easier for them to analyze their data, analyze the customer, and put them into different segments. Like we typically do the RFM analysis, recency, frequency, monetary, where we know who are the customer who've recently come, who frequently purchase from me, have a high average order value from monetary standpoint, and these are my most loyal, high spending customers. Now using this, I can create 9 different segments of users, and for them I can see what value do I need to deliver.
Yep.
And that will also justify the whole ROI of those CX initiatives.
No, no,
Because sorry, just to drawing a parallel, that how airlines have been doing it, how some of the restaurants have been doing it. If you go to an airline, there are tiers. I mean, first the business class would check in, then platinum, then gold, then silver,
Yep.
and then who are non-members who would check in. So as a customer, I own the experience. I mean, I own what experience I want. They've clearly identified, and my expectations are set. I mean, likewise of saying, if I have CDP in place, if I know my customer segments, who are my high value customers who've been very loyal with me, then I can go above and beyond in delivering that, going that extra mile to give that experience to them.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely right. So, like again, you're bang on tying back to something which we spoke about earlier in terms of the value, like
Value,
the three types of value: customer value, business value, and the mutual
mutual,
value. Right? When you talked about the tier based airline, we are at the center of the mutual value,
right?
because the more I'm spending, I'm going to get more benefits. Right? That is your mutual value. At the same time, customer value we just spoke about in terms of, hey, how can I get the right product, right experience, right service by knowing my behavior, how you're going to be much more relevant to me. But let's also talk about the value customers is also going to offer through this journey for the businesses, right? That again is going to be multifold. One is, of course, with better customer engagement, because hey, I have a like I'm able to understand my customers better. Of course, I'm going to improve my customer lifetime value, so I'm going to make more purchases, increase my top line. There is also this element of cost efficiencies for the business. As a great example, like marketing, right? To your point earlier,
Right.
in terms of like you're like depending on who are engaging where, instead of like probably reaching out customers across all channels and for the same customers and customer segments, the more insights that you have, right? You are able to like absolutely optimize your media spend. And again, typically, as you all know, like media is where one of the definitely like higher cost
Correct.
levers for any organizations to
Right. Cost to
like
acquire a customer is one of the key metrics.
exactly. So that's again we can bring in that efficiency for the business as well. And that also in a way creates a different kinds of value to the customer. So you're not spamming customer with thousands of emails every day with every this thing. Like, okay, which is the channel I'm most engaging with? Only reach out to me there. So that like that's also this benefit that we are able to yield to like customers as well.
Right. Interesting. And now shifting slightly towards what are some of the geo trends that we are seeing in CX evolution? Because every region, every country has certain or offerings or certain infrastructure which the brands can use. Now, some of the brands, global brands, let's say like a McDonald's, they would probably have a global strategy in terms of CX, but then they would also have to go local in terms of how do they deliver that experience. For example, in India, you have UPI payments. It's quick, easy. I mean, even if I go to a McDonald's restaurant at the screen, I can quickly pay within seconds as well, and then just go and collect. I mean, I don't have to scan my card or do anything or make a payment. And likewise in US, like we talk about Costco, that there's, I mean, you can return the product anytime you want, which probably isn't working in India. So there are different geo trends. Probably in Japan, it could be something else. So how do you think the brands would, especially global brands, A, global brands to adopt to it, and B, the local brands where the whole customer experience is getting disrupted because of ability of global brands to go and disrupt it.
No, absolutely. There are few things that come to my head, like when you ask about this, right? So, a couple of things. So, one, as I was mentioning earlier, like the digital twin or a synthetic view of customer, that is going to be one of the key enablers and like key element that is to be empowering the customer experience. And of course, there cannot be a talk without, especially in this context, without talking about generative AI,
Oh yeah.
right? So, we of course we need to figure out like how that it's absolutely at a nascent stage and it needs to evolve. But in my view, that is also going to be one of the interesting. I'm at least personally looking forward for how that is going to disrupt the whole customer experience. As simple as, especially in the marketing genre, right? Because we all know about when you talk about personalization, starting with the email being personalized with my name
Right.
and so on and so forth. But we are embarking on a era where, like, the whole content, whether it be the imagery, the video, or as well as it's not just about the name being personalized,
Correct.
the whole content being personalized based on the generative AI in terms of what exactly the customer would like to know. So that is definitely something which I would be personally looking forward for. The other thing, again, I'm also seeing is about, like, I would say something which we kind of discussed in detail is about CX driven value. Like, you don't want to go and blindly like go and say, hey, this is the customer experience I'm doing, I'm going to improve this, and so on and so forth. But in terms of, okay, what is the return I'm getting out of it, so that consciously that we are doing it, and also in an iterative fashion in terms of, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is the value I'm getting. If not, it's okay to fail.
Right.
Like how can I course correct it and get my like understand my customer better, and then like get towards it. And probably a few other things I can think of, but again probably maybe in the still in the nascent stage, is also about the sustainable like customer experience as well. How much like brand is focusing on the sustainability element, or like reducing the carbon footprint, telling about like what are the measures that they are doing, what kind of data centers that they are using. So
Right.
providing like the right, like what do you say, emotional connect with the customers in terms of how well they are addressing some of those elements as well.
And some of the brands are using it more like a branding strategy as well to connect with the customers at an emotional level as well.
Correct.
That people, users also feel connected with the brands. But interesting that, we talk about like CX trends and something, but now if I see, technology has been a great leveler, normalizing things, let me say. Because with the advent of new trends or innovations in tech, now those experiences can be, people can experience those things at anywhere from the world. Like the advent of let's say augmented reality.
Mm.
Like for example, like what IKEA using. I saw day before yesterday even Zomato is using. Let's say go to a particular menu, you select a dish. Using augmented reality, you can see on a table how that dish is going to look like.
Yeah.
It's nothing but generating that urge, that need to for somebody to go and probably place the order. It's interesting how virtual try on, like especially in case of cosmetics, is helping reduce the whole return rate. People can see what's working, what's not working, and they can experience it, be it any part of the world, so they can achieve it at scale. Be it now the shoppable videos, there are brands like QVC, I think, or Home Shopping Network, and there are a lot of other brands where the videos, where there are links, you can see the video, how it's being used, and then you can directly buy. Personalized recommendation, I think Amazon has been acing it, in helping increase that customer satisfaction. Gamification or user generated content, or even a virtual brick and mortar store. Because I think we've been talking about it as well. So it's a great leveler. Got it right this time. Leveler in terms of global brands, I feel, to give that consistent experience across geographies, and for some of the new brands to adopt to it and elevate the whole experience, which, like I said, is tying closely to all of the commerce related KPIs as well, to calculate the whole ROI of those CX initiatives.
Yep. No, no, absolutely right. So, and actually, when you talk about this, the like virtual reality and augmented reality and so on and so forth, the first thing that came to my mind was, probably I'm going to digress a bit from retail here.
Yeah, yeah.
Is about like when the like few weeks back, I was like watching, like I'm an adult like sports enthusiast, whether whatever sport, whether it's cricket or
Uh,
tennis. I was watching a game of cricket with my son, like a 10-year-old son, who doesn't have a clue about what cricket is all about, right? But when I was watching it, and of course we all know about the whole Hawkeye or the ultra edge capability that currently we have to figure out whether leg before wicket or
yeah,
so on and so forth. And just through that simple, like what do you say, augmented reality that,
right,
they were able to see, he was able to quickly grasp the intricacies
what it
of
means.
of of this game, right? Like, okay, where should the ball needs to be pitched, like where should it hit, and whether it's hitting the stick or not.
Right,
So like it made it so intuitive, like to understand a game. And same is the case when you're watching a tennis game, whether it's Djokovic hitting the ball outside
right,
the service court or like on the baseline. So the augmented reality like is definitely in like played a good role across different industries. Of course, certain industries it has played a much like a broader role, whereas the other industries it is like still upcoming. But it is going to be there, and it's going
right.
to like definitely play a very very critical role, as far as I see, in creating that intuitiveness and convenience in terms of how you're looking at it, especially in the context of retail.
I think it's a great example, I think, to probably conclude the discussion. And if just have to, I'll try to summarize the whole discussion, because it's very interesting, because we touched upon from how do we define CX, what's the, how do we define value of CX, the four W's, to talk about, how expectations have changed, to talk about what role does tech play, data being a big, playing a big role, how CDPs, is going to help clients to achieve that level or deliver that level of customer experience. And it's not just a marketing function now, it probably goes on, and the use cases spanning across the value chain. And then talking about some of the trends and geo trends, I mean, great. Thank you so much,
No, it
Vasanth. I
was
mean,
absolute pleasure and great connecting with you once again.
I
But
know. I mean, every time
then talk
I
about.
have a discussion, there's something to learn from, and I was like, I have to do this podcast with
No,
you.
no, same here. Like actually, like especially you coming from completely like a much broader like industry experience. Great to hear some of those examples that you spoke about. And it's been a very enriching experience for myself
No,
as well. Like thanks for like having me here.
no, likewise, likewise. Thank you so much.